Welcome to episode 12 of this series on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. In the last few chapters, the monster recounted to Frankenstein how he took shelter in a hovel, learning language and human history by secretly observing a down-on-their-luck family. In this episode, he continues his secret education, and in doing so, discovers romantic thinking.
Up to this point, the monster's education has been based on science and history. He's learned about language and the successes and mistakes of the human race. At the beginning of chapter 13, however, the monster describes how he comes across a satchel in the woods that's filled with books.
I eagerly seized the prize and returned with it to my hovel. Fortunately, the books were written in the language, the elements of which I had acquired at the cottage. They consisted of Paradise Lost, a volume of Plutarch's Lives, and the Sorrows of Werther. The possession of these treasures gave me extreme delight. I now continually studied and exercised my mind upon these histories, whilst my friends were employed in their ordinary occupations. The way the monster talks about these texts is crucial. He refers to them as histories, showing that he doesn't understand that these fictional texts are not to be viewed in the same way as the historical and scientific texts he had previously been learning from. Once again, we see the parallel between the monster and Frankenstein. In the same way that Frankenstein believed in alchemy until he was told otherwise, the monster begins to put his belief in Plutarch and Milton.
In this sense, we can say that there's a schism forming between the monster's reading and his ability to comprehend ideas fully. He is still, at least here, a child in need of direction that he will never get because he's been abandoned. Once again, the monster's suffering can be placed at the feet of Frankenstein.
Let's take a close look at all three of the texts that the monster found. The first, The Sorrows of Young Werther by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, is a tragic tale about a young man who commits suicide after falling in love with a woman engaged to another man. It's an intensely emotional book, and that it is told through the form of letters would only have intensified its believability to the monster. As a formative text, it is very negative, and the monster confirms that the book taught him despondency and gloom.
The second book, a collection of Plutarch's Lives, rescues the monster from this gloom somewhat. The collection recounts the actions and thoughts of different men through history, but with more focus on exploring the character of those men than the true history of events. It is from Plutarch that the monster gains an idea of what a good person looks and acts like.
He elevated me above the wretched sphere of my own reflections, to admire and love the heroes of past ages. Of the three texts, however, the most influential is Milton's Paradise Lost. The monster sings the poem's praises to Frankenstein, stating that it moved every feeling of wonder and awe in him. Once again, he refers to the epic poem as a true history, which he reads literally, and it is most compelling to him because he draws links between himself and Adam. Like Adam, I was created apparently united by no link to any other being in existence.
The similarities end there. As the monster points out, his state was far different from mine in every other respect. He had come forth from the hands of God a perfect creature, happy and prosperous, guarded by the especial care of his Creator. He was allowed to converse with and acquire knowledge from beings of a superior nature, but I was wretched, helpless, and alone.
Frankenstein, in this moment, is painted as an unnatural god figure, bringing life into the world without any of the sense of responsibility that should be attached to it. It is because of this that the monster admits he sometimes considers the character of Satan as being a better representative for his condition. For often, like him, when I viewed the bliss of my protectors, the bitter gall of envy rose within me.
the fall of Satan resonates with the overall theme of abandonment throughout this novel, and that the monster feels such a powerful connection to the fallen angel is a sign that this abandonment is the kernel from which all of the monster's trauma comes.
Finally, the monster produces a surprise fourth document, notes from the diaries of Frankenstein himself. At first, the monster had neglected the diaries because he couldn't understand them. Once he could, however, he studied them with diligence and was sickened by what he discovered. Everything is related in them which bears reference to my accursed origin. The whole detail of that series of disgusting circumstances which produced it is set in view. The minutest description of my odious and loathsome person is given, in language which painted your own horrors and rendered mine ineffaceable. I sickened as I read.
The monster cries out at Frankenstein, asking him why he created a monster so hideous that even he, the creator, would turn from it in disgust. His cries are sentimental and hyperbolic, reflecting the style of the 3 romantic texts he has read. God in pity made man beautiful and alluring, after his own image, but my form is a filthy type of yours, more horrid from its very resemblance. Satan had his companions, fellow devils, to admire and encourage him, but I am solitary and detested.
It is clear at this point that the monster blames Frankenstein for his current state. And based on the evidence he's provided, it's hard to argue that Frankenstein has not at least some part in it. However, his tale is not complete, and he returns to the story of the de Lacy family. His story, up until now taking place in the summer, a time of light, now moves into autumn, with the days growing shorter. This can be argued to be a sign of the monster turning away from Enlightenment thinking as he increasingly embraces a more romantic and emotional outlook on life. It also reflects his depressed mental state and increasing isolation as the cold of winter begins to roll in.
Eventually, spurred on by his feelings of isolation, the monster decides to make first contact with the de Lacys. He approaches the old man, who is blind and therefore won't recoil at the sight of the monster. Entering the cottage, he immediately begins to describe his utter loneliness to the old man.
I am an unfortunate and deserted creature. I look around and have no relation or friend upon earth. These amiable people to whom I go have never seen me, and know little of me. I am full of fears, for if I fail there, I am an outcast in the world forever. Moved by the monster's plight, the old man listens to his entreatments for kindness and responds warmly, saying that though he is poor, it would afford him true pleasure to help a fellow human creature.
But, as we know, the monster is not a human creature.
Exactly. And that becomes clear when the younger members of the family return to the cottage and see the monster for the first time. The young man, Felix, attacks the monster, who, despite being able to rip the man limb from limb, flees into the wilderness.
It's a tragic moment. The monster has now been rejected for the second time, almost on the anniversary of his birth. At the opening of chapter 14, the monster blames Victor for these rejections, calling him cursed creator and describing the fever he fell into after fleeing.
But the fever of my blood did not allow me to be visited by peaceful dreams. The monster's descriptions of the misery he felt in that moment echo the fever that Frankenstein fell into at the moment of the monster's creation. This repeated doubling is a clue to us from Shelley that the monster and Frankenstein are bound together.
The monster witnesses the de Lacy family fleeing their cottage the next day, and at this point begins to feel a creeping urge for revenge. His increasingly dark state of mind is reflected by the countryside's descent into winter. the quiet countryside transforms into a gothic landscape of fierce wind and mighty avalanches. The monster too is undergoing a transformation, experiencing a kind of insanity in my spirits that burst all bounds of reason and reflection.
The monster's environment has become a metaphor for loss, devastation, anger, and turmoil. In the depths of winter, there is no light or warmth to comfort the monster, and his thoughts become ever darker. Nature decayed around me, and the sun became heatless. Rain and snow poured around me. Mighty rivers were frozen. The surface of the earth was hard and chill and bare, and I found no shelter. Oh, earth! How often did I imprecate curses on the cause of my being? The mildness of my nature had fled, and all within me was turned to gall and bitterness.
The harsh winter is a metaphor for the limits of mankind and violent, hostile frontiers. The monster, as a resident of the countryside, has become a part of it, and this marks his complete and total departure from humanity. The final straw comes when the monster, seeing a girl drowning in a river, rescues her, only to be shot by a man who believes he's attacking her. Wounded, angry and despondent, the monster vows vengeance.
The feelings of kindness and gentleness which I had entertained but a few moments before gave place to hellish rage and gnashing of teeth. Inflamed by pain, I vowed eternal hatred and vengeance to all mankind. With the information he has about Frankenstein, the monster sets off for Geneva. Upon arriving there, he encounters Frankenstein's younger brother, William. Believing that the young child is too small to understand how horrific he is, the monster grabs William, hoping to make him his companion. William struggles, and in his attempts to restrain the boy, the monster strangles him. This moment, the death of an innocent, marks the monster's final departure from humanity with no hope of return.
That brings us up to the current moment between Frankenstein and his creation. The monster's narration serves the purpose of questioning whether it's nature or nurture which has the greatest effect on our character. The monster is clearly highly intelligent, learning to speak, read, and think very quickly. However, his appearance means he's rejected from all aspects of humanity.
While he was not born evil or immoral, the monster is rejected repeatedly, and these experiences shape him into the creature he has become. The implication is that we begin as naturally good creatures, but that humanity is a corrupting or spoiling presence.
The chapter closes with the monster asking Victor to create him a companion, so he can finally be accepted and loved. Frankenstein must create a creature of the same species, with the same defects. Once again, we are presented with the theme of Genesis. The monster, as Adam, is asking for his Eve.
Perhaps if he had asked for the partner before killing William, we as readers might feel that it's only fair he find a companion. However, now he has become something completely separated from humanity. There is a creeping horror to the request. What if Frankenstein creates another monster capable of the same evil? What does this mean for humanity? And what will happen if Frankenstein once again crosses that boundary between life and death?
We'll get into that next episode. This was quite a lot to cover, so it might be worth rereading the chapters with what you've learned. Focus in particular on the transformation of the monster and how the introduction of extreme feeling changes him.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next episode.